I spoke about cerebral palsy 1 week ago, and this is part 2 of the same talk. And what I did want to cover in this one, which I already had told you last week, is the multidisciplinary management of cerebral palsy, including early intervention, the drug treatment for spasticity and dystonia, certain basic surgical aspects of management, and then about genetic aspects and some cerebral palsy mimics. And we can entertain questions at the end. So a very quick recap, that cerebral palsy has been defined as a non-progressive injury to the immature brain, which means a brain which is less than 5 years old, leading to motor dysfunction. And lesions are not progressive, but there is clinical manifestations that change over time. So clinical manifestations are not static, although the lesion may not be progressive. Depending on the site of the lesion, the tone may be of different types. Like a spastic tone is more likely to be due to a lesion in the cortex, dystonia or dyskinesia, lesion in the basal ganglia, hypotonia or ataxia, most probably cerebellum. And if you have a mixed tone, then of course the lesion is likely to be a diffuse. Anatomically, we had discussed that it can be of different types, like hemiplegic CP involving one half, diplegic CP involving the lower limbs, quadriplegic CP, 4 limbs plus the trunk. Monoplegic CP is extremely rare, and bilateral hemiplegia is something where you have involvement of the 4 limbs, but arms are more affected than the legs. Now, apart from the primary impairments, which can be impairments of muscle tone, balance, strength, selectivity, and sensations, there are secondary impairments as well. And these are things like contractures and deformities, like scoliosis. And also tertiary impairments like adaptive mechanisms by the child to try and keep erect, like knee hyperextension in stance. So not only do we deal with the primary impairments, but also have to find out and look after the secondary and tertiary impairments. Now, contractures and deformity are very common, and the common sites for contracture in the upper limb are of the pronatus, wrist and finger flexors and thumb adductors, and in the lower limbs, hip adductors, flexors, knee flexors, and ankle plantar flexors. So essentially, if you leave a child with cerebral palsy alone and not do anything, he will go into something what is like a fetal position, meaning flexion of the hips and knees and upper limbs as well. Also, there's common sites for deformity like the spine, like the hip and shoulder, which can be subluxed or dislocated, and also of the feet, which can be either valgus, varus, and equinus. Not only the motor problems, but associated problems in CP may involve seizures, visual impairments, hearing problems, intellectual and learning problems, communication problems, and also oromotor dysfunction, GI problems, problems related to dentition, respiratory function, bowel and bladder problems, and of course, very important social and emotional disturbances. So if you're talking about management, then the pediatrician's role is, of course, very important. And the initial role, of course, consists of making a correct diagnosis, which is so very important. And then perhaps trying to determine the etiology, identify the type and extent and severity of the neuromotor deficits, and not forgetting all the associated problems which I told you in the previous slide. Now, very briefly, it's very easy to label somebody as cerebral palsy, but there are a lot many mimics, and these also need to be understood and thought about. Some of these are progressive disorders on the left, like just a few examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but type 1 arginase deficiency, Sjogren-Larsen syndrome, Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, Chiari type 1 malformation, Dandy-Walker syndrome, Angelman syndrome. And more commonly, the non-progressive disorders resembling CP, any child who has intellectual disability, global developmental delay, sometimes is just given a label out of the blue as CP child. Again, that is not correct. Again, for different deprivations, malnutrition, although that is getting less and less, a child can have some features resembling cerebral palsy. And even non-motor handicaps like being blind can give rise to some aspects of cerebral palsy. Motor handicaps like spina bifida and myopathies are also likely to be in the mimics. So one has to think about all of these progressive disorders as well as non-progressive disorders before labeling a child as cerebral palsy. Because the most important thing is once somebody has labeled a child, it is very rare that we have the time to go back and see why the labeling was done. Was it a true labeling, or was this just out of the blue that somebody decided to say this is cerebral palsy? Now, breaking the news is a very important part of the whole management. And for this, you need a multidisciplinary team with ideally a developmental pediatrician as the team leader. But of course, you don't have that all the time. So a person like a pediatrician with neurology interest, a pediatrician with experience, a pediatric neurologist can also initiate this process. And during this process, there are a lot of things you can talk about, but the thing is, I feel that you should have empathy for the child and the family. You should try and reinforce some positives about the whole issue rather than just talk about negatives. And of course, you cannot hurry. You need time for that particular session for the family and the child so that you can actually talk about a lot of things. And then you go for a comprehensive assessment. Again, here, a neurodevelopmental pediatrician is the team leader. And you can see, I'm not going to go through the list, but a whole load of therapists and important other doctors that are part of this evaluation and assessment. This is the ideal list, preferably under one roof in a child development center setting. But that is very rarely possible in our country. Maybe a few very good private hospitals or higher centers have this facility. So the minimum team should comprise of a pediatrician assisted by a physiotherapist, occupational therapist, speech and language therapist, and even probably a psychotherapist, psychologist. So if we have a team of 4 with the pediatrician and have inputs from other important people that I've mentioned in the previous slide, as and when necessary, even if it's not under the same roof, then also we can start a program of assessment and management by a multidisciplinary team. And why is this important? Because early detection of babies at risk of cerebral palsy is very important for the outcome. Now, what is the importance? If you see, you have a high risk infant, you may have high risk factors, or you may not have high risk factors. And if you have an early detection, then you go for early interventions. And what happens is that a child who possibly would have a GMFCS score of 4 or 5, which is pretty bad at 2 years, by early intervention may actually have a lower GMFCS score. And you remember the score from last time of 1 and 2. Or even ideally could go back into a normal neurological examination. So that is why we understand the importance of early detection, because we can go in early interventions and better neurological outcome. So early detection tools, and this was just in the question answer session last time, Preeti brought it up. And these are some of the important things that have come up in the last maybe 10 years. Neurological assessment by general movements assessment by Fractals. Another important scale is the Hammersmith Infant Neurological Examination, or HINE. The Emil Thiessen method of neurological assessment that involves measuring different angles of the joints, and another one called the Towen Infant Neurological Examination. But the first two, I think, are much more popular, the Hammersmith and the general movements. And of course, other things that I discussed last time, like neuroimaging, MRI in terms of equivalent age, and other associated tests, neurophysiology studies, EEG, VEP, somatosensory evoked potential, and also getting the parental questionnaire feedback by a developmental assessment of young children's scale. These are all important early detection tools. So early detection, the current practice should be you assess all the risk factors like prematurity, low birth weight, asphyxia, shock, need for ventilation, chronic lung disease, sepsis, jaundice, cardiac, gastrointestinal, or other malformations. Looking whether the MRI is normal or not, and then going on for the neuromotor assessment by Hammersmith method at regular intervals at 3, 6, 9, and 12 months, and then looking at the functional status, GMFCS, by 2 years, and all throughout going for early intervention. The Hammersmith infant neurological examination can be done between 2 to 24 months. It was developed by Victor Dubowitz, who was working in Hammersmith, and his wife. Both of them were very importantly responsible for this. There are 3 sections in that: neurological examination of posture, cranial nerve function, reflexes, tone movements, development of motor functions like head control, sitting, walking, crawling, rolling, grasping, and state of behavior. And it has a detailed assessment, and it has got lots of pictures which you can look at and decide where your child is fitting into in terms of the corrected gestational age, and then trying to find out where the child is developmentally. And this is just a brief a picture of how you can do that without going into the details. The 3 sections that I told you about: neurological items, section 1, as you can see on the left lower part, motor abilities, as you can see on the right upper part, and behavior, section 3, on the right lower part. Another aspect is the assessment of general movements, or GMA, where you can detect unusual fidgety movements or other abnormal movements, including asymmetry or paucity of movements, abnormalities of tone, floppiness, spasticity, dystonia, head control, and feeding difficulties as well. And this is done by videoing the child. Sometimes even home videos may be helpful, but ideally it should be done under controlled circumstances by a professional. And to recognize the most common delayed motor milestones in a child with cerebral palsy, because these are the red flags. What are they? Not sitting by 8 months of corrected gestational age, not walking by 18 months of corrected gestational age, and early asymmetry of hand function before 1 year of corrected gestational age. So these are the red flag signs, and if you have these, then most likely your child is heading for a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. Now, why is it important? Because the infant can receive diagnostic specific early intervention and surveillance to optimize neuroplasticity and prevent complications. And also the parents can receive psychological and financial support in certain situations if available. And while cerebral palsy diagnosis has traditionally been made at the age of 2 years or older, recent studies have shown that special providers can make the diagnosis as early as 3 months of age, and international guidelines have been developed from 2017 for these. And developmental assessments by multidisciplinary group of scientific and clinical experts and parents have made these guidelines, which are based on the latest systematic review of evidence. And this is an algorithm of such a guideline, where I know it's not coming up nicely on the slide. You have a newborn with some detectable risks, or an infant with detectable risks, like prematurity, encephalopathy, history of neurological risk factors, parental identified concern, and then you have interventions, assessments that can lead to early interventions. So things like doing the Hein, MRI, motor tests, and then making your assessment diagnosis. Because early detection leads to early intervention, and early intervention is a system of coordinated services that are deliberately timed to promote child's age, appropriate growth and development, and supports family during the critical early years. What are the goals? Well, the ultimate goal for long term is gaining independence in activities of daily living, like even going to school or work and social life. But to do this, we need some short-term goals or treatment, like improving the mobility, preventing deformity, education of the parents, and providing community and social support. And the basic thing is that, as the child is saying, no two children of cerebral palsy are the same. They may be of the same type of cerebral palsy, but just because somebody has, let's say, spastic diplegia, you cannot routinely say that, okay, these are the things we are going to do, because even within diplegia, there may be a lot of wide difference. And so from the child's angle, it's saying that please help us develop skills rather than trying to treat our ills. So we have to always be positive and see what we can do best for the child rather than just talking about the negatives. And for this, we have different therapies. Now, physiotherapy is one of the most important. When started early in life, it's helpful in promoting normal motor development and preventing deformity and contractures. In the young child, it aims at reducing abnormal patterns of movement and posture and promoting normal ones to enable the child to gain maximum functional independence. And a number of techniques have been used. I don't want to go into the details, but one very commonly or popular one is called the Bobath technique. I think if the students at least remember the name, then it may give you a brownie point in the exam. So Bobath technique consists of guiding the child through normal sequences of motor development, inhibiting the primitive or abnormal reflexes and reinforcement of normal postural reflexes so as to facilitate normal movements. So physical therapy helps children with cerebral palsy to overcome physical limitation obstacles, increase independence, expand range of motion, build muscle tone, and also to decrease the chances of bone deformity, learn about adaptive equipment, increase fitness, flexibility, balance, posture, and reduce physical discomfort or pain. All of these are very important. On the left lower side, you can see a basic physiotherapy going on. And on the right, you can see a Western, much more sort of high-end physiotherapy of a child going on. So it can all depend on where you are working, but definitely has to be in place. Occupational therapy is another very important thing. Whereas physiotherapy looks at the gross motor functions, occupational therapy aims to improve the fine motor functions like hand and upper extremity function through play and purposeful activity. There are defined systematic treatment methods for occupational therapy. Sensory integration therapy is a very important term that you should know. Sensory feedback, CNS perception, execution functions, these are all very important so as to improve motor planning capacity of a child. And the child should be, or the parents should be taught how to make the child do things by themselves. For example, in the left upper picture, instead of always feeding the child yourself, the mother is taught to get the child in the sitting position, and even by special devices, special spoons, trying to assist the child with self-feeding. And left lower, if you have a child with severe adductor spasms of the hip, then one activity may be actually to put in a rural setting the child on something like a horse or anything similar that will help abduct the hips, and that will be an activity or a therapy. So sometimes occupational therapy and physiotherapy are, of course, done together, closely linked. You don't have OT in every situation. Physiotherapists, of course, are much more widely available, but OTs are less likely to. So a lot of physiotherapy and occupational therapy work go side by side and overlap. Again, I said occupational therapy looks after the activities of daily living, like feeding, bathing, dressing, toilet training, and coordination and sensory perceptual integration and multi-sensory stimulation is most important. Play therapy is another thing where you use a natural activity with a young child to help him or her consolidate the levels of development that he or she has reached and encourage him to move on to the next level by play rather than exercise. Parents are taught how to break down each activity into its simplest components and make the child practice these in real life. And all of this is done by different therapists. For example, in this rural setting, in this cartoon, the grandmother, in the absence of the mother, is asking the child who is non-ambulant fully to try and pick up a mug of water from the storage pot and giving positive reinforcement, and then later on saying that, okay, now can you please help me with the firewood? So everything can be done also in the rural setting. It doesn't mean that you have to have a CDC with all the mattresses and everything in place before you can go for this. So these are normal activities that you can have in the settings that you are working or the child is having. And if you don't do these well, there are different contractures that can develop in the upper limbs and lower limbs. And you can have a spinal scoliosis. So in the bottom part of the cartoons, you can see a child encouraged to be participating in activities whereby you just sat her with the hips abducted, or you can use a child playing with a certain thing in this particular, and also getting them to play while standing just with help of some wooden structures. And all of these are adaptive measures of how you can do different therapies in the rural settings, in resource constrained settings. Then comes the role of the speech and language therapist. This is also very important because the sound production, words and syllable production, the pitch, voice regulation, listening and perception, articulation and pronunciation, vocabulary, understanding and comprehension, voice quality, and also very importantly, the chewing and swallowing activity is regulated and helped by the speech and language therapist. The psychologist has also many functions, including managing the emotions, maintaining focus, coping skills, gratification ways, developing friendships, and also to help the family to overcome emotional trauma, reduce anxiety, resolving relationship conflicts, treating depression, and family counseling. So all these can be issues in a child and a family with cerebral palsy. Then comes the role of orthotics and prosthetics. And this is, of course, improving and diversifying day by day. And all of these are used to increase the function, prevent deformity, stabilize the joint or the trunk and extremities, and facilitate selective motor control, decrease spasticity, both in the normal settings as well as the post-operative phase. So orthotics and prosthetics, without going into the details, have got a major role. And they may be of the basic ones like walkers, standers, crutches, and canes, but even more advanced ones like electrical wheelchairs and many other. And all of these help with improving the balance, energy expenditure, and posture. So assistive and adaptive devices are various simple modifications like angled spoons, two-handed cups, old stools and boxes, parallel bars with logs of wood, standing frames and prone boards that can be adapted to help a child with ambulation. And this is tailor-made sitting apparatus of a child who is non-ambulant. You can see the different helpful things that have been implicated or implemented in this to get the child in the best sitting position, right from the head down to the toe. And now a number of high technology devices like programmed wheelchairs, electronic feeding devices, and various access systems and computerized speech systems and other things are available. And for example, a child who has hearing impairment with cerebral palsy, even cochlear implants are available to improve their hearing ability and therefore help with the speech therapy process. Splints, casts, calipers, special design shoes, AFOs are very useful in patients with spastic diplegia and those who have a dynamic spasticity at the tendo-Achilles. Now coming to another important aspect, which is management of spasticity. And of course, this has to be done with the physiotherapy that is regularly going on. What a clinician can do is try and help the process by giving some medications. The most common medication we use is baclofen. Now this acts at the level of the spinal cord neurons and enhances GABA activity. The starting dose is usually 1 milligram per kilogram or even less if you want to go slow, and slowly built up to a dose of 2 milligram per kilogram or a maximum of 30 milligram per kilogram, monitored by a clinical response. Now, they are very, very sort of senior doctors who even have used 90 milligram and 100 milligrams, but these are people who are expert in their fields and monitor these children very closely. So for common use, I would say keeping the dose between 0.51 and 2 milligrams should be the goal. However, it is not recommended or needs to be used very carefully in children with seizures, as it reduces the threshold for seizure activity. The other thing that we use or used in various centers is diazepam. Particularly a small dose given prior to physiotherapy is effective. And in some cases, especially where anxiety increases the spasticity, it, however, has some unacceptable side effects like drowsiness and therefore has to be used with caution. Tizanidine is an alpha-2 adrenergic agent, and this is also available in the market, but this usually is used by experts like developmental pediatricians or pediatric neurologists. Dantrolene sodium is also mentioned as one of the medications, but I do not have any experience in the use of dantrolene. So the main medications I use are baclofen. Of course, physiotherapy needs to go on. Diazepam very rarely, but I see it's quite popularly used in places like Vellore, CMC Vellore, I see uses a very standard doses of diazepam in the management of spasticity. And also I use a very few cases, I use tizanidine. Now, baclofen can also be used intrathecally as an infusion pump. But this is a very elaborate process. It needs an expert. It needs lots of money, not only to start it up because it's an operation, a sort of where you need to put a pump right into the intrathecal space, but also the continuing use of the intrathecal baclofen, which itself is expensive. But of course, where the resources are there, it is used. And I have seen a few patients when I was at working at Great Ormond Street Hospital more than 20 years ago. I had seen some patients that were on this pump, and these were reserved for cases of severe spasticity and disabling dystonia. Botulinum toxin is another important aspect. It is derived from Clostridium botulinum. It causes muscle relaxation by blocking the release of acetylcholinesterase with loss of motor end plates. However, the function is between 3 to 6 months only because new nerve root sprouts at the junctions, and therefore the function of the botulinum toxin reduces with time. It is more often used in children with the spastic diplegia to try and get them up into the ambulant position. So it's used a lot in lower limb spasticity. But having said that, some pediatric orthopedic doctors also use it with upper limb spasticity. in a very nutshell, it should be used only by experts, because again, it is prohibitively expensive, and it is not to be used alone. With the botulinum toxin, you have to have a continuous physiotherapy support. Surgery is useful in some children with spasticity, especially in the lower limbs. Procedures like tendon lengthening and transfer are done. Uh, General multi-level surgery is also done by pediatric orthopedic doctors after the age of 8 years. And simultaneous availability of intensive physiotherapy, like I have stressed before, is very essential. There's a procedure called dorsal rhizotomy, which you should know maybe if you are going for the exam, just the term, that this is a procedure where you selectively resect the posterior nerve roots from L2 to S2 to help with reduce the spasticity of the lower limbs uh, with sufficient trunk control. Its advantage must be weighed carefully against the sensory loss that may occur after the procedure in the lower limbs. Relief of athetosis and dystonia is usually done by trihexyphenidyl. Carbamazepine can also be used. And then there's a whole lot of surgical procedures like deep brain stimulation, thalamotomy, stereotactic dentatomy, and so on and so forth. Electrode implants that are coming up. If you look at literature, there's a lot. But for students, I think if you just remember that, yes, I know about these procedures that are also used, possibly for treatment of severe athetosis and dystonia. And if you can remember one term like deep brain stimulation procedures, I think that would be enough. So coming to the last few slides, parental counseling is again very important. This is one of the most important aspects, because like I told you, not only have you broken the bad news at the initial part, but you need to keep on motivating these parents so that their morale doesn't come down. You need to always positively reinforce, because this is going to be very pivotal in the management of the child. And it is an ongoing process, and it is the responsibility of not only the pediatrician, the developmental pediatrician, but all the therapists. And this should be done periodically in various stages of the child's development. And unfortunately, this is one thing that we really lack because of lack of time. Now, genetics and cerebral palsy. Well, in one slide, all I can say is that there are certain points in favor of a genetic basis of cerebral palsy. What are these? Mutation in multiple genes present with CP-like features. Number two, prevalence of congenital anomalies is higher in children with cerebral palsy. Number three, there is a higher concordance rate of CP in monozygotic twins. And there is a risk of CP in higher inbred families, meaning where there is consanguinity. And there is sometimes an aggregation of CP cases in families. So all of these suggest that definitely there is a genetic basis of cerebral palsy. And to be more specific, there are single genes that have been seen that cause idiopathic cerebral palsy, or the so-called idiopathic cerebral palsy. Just a few names is GAD1 and KANK1 and AP4 complex. These are certain genes that have been found to be associated with patients with cerebral palsy. So that brings me to the end of part 2, or where I have discussed hopefully the early intervention importance, the management importance, therapy, drug treatment of spasticity, dystonia, and I've touched on certain surgical aspects and also genetic aspects of cerebral palsy. And I'm open to questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
one of the major problems that we face, especially in female cerebral palsy, is that some of them have a very precocious puberty and
Yes,
menstruation, and also along with that, there is spasticity of the lower limbs and adductor spasm.
yes.
So, what is your suggestion about that to stop the menstruation or stopping the precocious puberty and also the misuse or abuse? So, what you suggest about that?
I think these are all very, very important and pertinent questions that you have asked. But unfortunately, there is no simple solution in our setup because we are so busy dealing with the spasticity and other problems of the child that we sometimes forget this. But people who work with cerebral palsy and have a checklist, in the checklist, all the points you mentioned are important. Now, for me, what I have done, and this is obviously at the parent's request of a parent who is very focused on the child, uh, and I wouldn't just put it down to cerebral palsy, but even a child with intellectual impairment or global developmental delay, learning difficulties. There are a lot of issues with menstrual cycles and the difficulty of how to control them or stop them, because it can be really tedious of a child who doesn't even understand anything about the process, and the parents and the mother especially to deal with that. So spasticity control is one aspect, but even dealing with the menstrual cycle is important. And for this, I think you need to have a good gynecology colleague who understands not only the, how to control the menstruation, but also the empathy of a child who is suffering with this, and the family. Regarding precocious puberty, I wouldn't say I have seen or used maneuvers or medications to sort of, prevent that happening. But there could be literature on that. But definitely for menstrual cycles and management, yes. I wouldn't say it's routinely in my practice, but it usually comes up from the parents who are concerned about it, and then I try and help them through the process of the referral to the right person.
One thing in CP, আমরা যেমন ফ্যামিলি হিস্ট্রিটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট বলতাম, যে ফ্যামিলি হিস্ট্রিতে সিমিলার সর্ট অফ হিস্ট্রি থাকলে উই ইউজ টু go for neurodegenerative disorder. In counseling also, we used to emphasize more to have a normal child. এইখানে যে তুমি একটা জেনেটিক বেসিস বললে, এটা এখন কি সেটা মানে
it's opening
very uncommon,
opening up a Pandora's box. So আমি বলছি না যে প্রত্যেকটা সেরিব্রাল পলসিকে আমরা জেনেটিক বলছি। I would rather focus on যেটা আমি আগে বলেছি, যে প্রপার ডায়াগনোসিস, যেটা আমরা বলছি যে before you put a label, you have to think about the differential diagnosis. আর কিছু হতে পারে কিনা? Is this a cerebral palsy mimic? Could this be either a non-progressive but not CP, or could it be a progressive disorder but not CP? এইগুলো ভাবতে হবে এবং তারপর লেবেলটা দিতে হবে. You always have to keep and family history, particularly if it is the only child in the family who has developed it, then of course it is unlikely. But there are families where even you have a third child who has said that, okay, third child cerebral palsy ache, সেইখানে I think you should be much, have your wide open net to say that now this cannot be just the idiopathic cerebral palsy happening every time in this family. You need to think about a differential diagnosis, a CP mimic. And also
that's very important actually.
And also মানে not only for the child you are seeing, যার হয়তো বেশি কিছু হবে না, but also for the next person, next child that the parents might be thinking about in future. Why not, if it's preventable, why not do everything related to this child so that you don't have a recurrence for the next child? And Amijani, it's difficult. You need resources. You need to do things like even genetic tests. But even if you can get the genetic test subsidized, or the resources, or you can even explain, even if they cannot do it, as a doctor, your duty is to explain the options. That is what I feel.
There are
মায়াদি,
few
আপনি
problems,
যেটা
Mayadi.
বললেন না, মায়াদি এটা বললো, আমাদের স্টুডেন্ট বেলায় এরকম টিচিং ছিল, if you have a family history of same thing occurring, it's not cerebral palsy. এখন তো
একদম
এটাই
একদম স্যার।
না,
সেটাই জিজ্ঞেস
তখন
করছেন।
তখন যেটা ছিল যে there are few conditions যেগুলো এখন মানে আমরা ডায়াগনোসিস করতে পারি, আগে যেগুলো ডায়াগনোসিস করতে পারতাম না।
হ্যাঁ,
যেমন ধরুন MECP2 gene, একটা ফিমেল হচ্ছে MECP2 gene or creatinine synthesis disorder, যেগুলো এখন is upcoming as creatinine synthesis disorder। আগে আমরা গ্লুটারিক অ্যাসিডিউরিয়া ডায়াগনোসিস করতে পারতাম না। Anyone retarded is CP. I have seen, we have a patient, I have shown the photographs a few days back, 3 times admitted in this hospital. That's about 15 years back. And every time was diagnosed as cerebral palsy till we came into the involvement, and it was diagnosed as Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. So we have seen Pelagius much better, 3 children being diagnosed as CP. So there are conditions. Angelman is very commonly missed in our country as a CP. So you need to think of it unless until you diagnose, chance of second one will be there. So আমাদের একটা বাচ্চা আছে Cockayne syndrome. Cockayne syndrome diagnosed হয়েছিল, diagnosis হয়নি সাউথ থেকে, তারপরে আমাদের এখানে আসলো, তখন আমরা ডায়াগনোসিস করলাম Cockayne syndrome. So there are so many conditions which can mimic cerebral palsy, যেটা অরিজিৎ বলেছে already. So I have sent a list to the postgraduates also just now. So we need to think of these conditions.
তার মানে it doesn't holds true, আগের কথাটা it doesn't holds true anymore. If you have another family member suffering from CP, it is not cerebral palsy, it is something else. It doesn't hold true.
Oh yes.
আগে ভাবতো birth asphyxia মানে CP, but not necessarily. Not all birth asphyxia lands into CP.
Absolutely.
So এটা এখন আর নেই, ওই কথাটা বললে এখন ভুল বলা হবে।
And two things I would like to two things I would like to emphasize is that this tone that is going to become abnormal, sometimes it takes time. So first of all, just because you have a tone on the lower side or a normal tone in the early part, that doesn't mean that cerebral palsy cannot happen later on. Sometimes the physiotherapists do a very good job and normalize the tone. সেটা একটা ব্যাপার। And another thing is that if you have a persisting hypotonia, labeling cerebral palsy is much more difficult rather than have you got spasticity or dystonia.
Spasticity তে দুটো জিনিস অরিজিৎ, একটা হচ্ছে যে arginase deficiency গুলো কিন্তু lower limb spasticity নিয়েই আসে,
right?
That is gradually evolving. And আরেকটা কন্ডিশনও যেটা হয় যে pyruvate dehydrogenase deficiency, সেগুলো অনেক সময় cerebral palsy এর মতন মিমিক করে। But one important advice that I always give, because most of the time কি হয়, these parents, they don't want a second child. They don't want a second child. না ডাক্তারবাবু একটা আছে, একটাকে নিয়েই থাকবো। But they do forget one thing, that not that always cerebral palsy children will have a decreased lifespan, and it is expected that the parents are going to die 25 years before than this child. So all cerebral palsy child parents should be encouraged to have one more child, so that this child can protect this cerebral palsy child. So that's very important, and that you need to give them an assurance after proper test that this is not a genetic disease. After doing a proper genetic test, and you go ahead for the next pregnancy. That's one. আর আরেকটা জিনিস যেটা ওই বলছিলাম যে ওই menstruation and adapter tenotometer কথাটা I have already told that. আর botulinum toxin এর ব্যাপারটায় যেটা অরিজিৎ বললো, I always prefer botulinum toxin. The reason for that, it will come back, but it gives you an improved motor learning. Once a child starts walking, he goes on walking and walking. So হয়তো 6 মাস ওর এটা থাকবে এই অ্যাকশনটা, যে মাসেল গুলো লুজ হয়ে গেল, and then he goes on walking and walking and walking. যখন আমরা এটা যখন গাড়ি চালানো শিখি, তখন আমরা কথায় কথায় গাড়িটা নিয়ে বেরিয়ে যাই। সাইকেল হলো ঠিক সেই জিনিস, কথায় কথায় মা আমি যে চিনিটা নিয়ে আসছি, যে সাইকেলটা চালিয়ে নিয়ে আসলাম। So this improved motor learning is a very good form of physiotherapy that which helps in the long run.
And I must emphasize with botulinum toxin about the expertise. The person giving the botulinum toxin should be doing it in a very controlled manner. Somebody who is a pediatric orthopedic doctor, for example.
And Dr. Niloy Das খুব ভালো দেয়।
And
Dr.
ably assisted,
খুব ভালো দেয়।
right, and ably assisted by a physiotherapist who is a pediatric physiotherapist. আমি অনেক সময় দেখেছি যে either the counseling hasn't been done, that the patients have been given the botulinum toxin, but the subsequent rehab program of physiotherapy isn't done in a proper way. So, you know, it's all lost. So, very, very important for the physiotherapy to also carry on.
আমি কি প্যারেন্টসকে কি কাউন্সেলিং করি, দেখো এই বটুলিনাম টক্সিনটা হচ্ছে যে একটা লোহার রডকে যখন আমরা বেঁকাই, তখন আমরা ওটাকে গরম করে নেই, কিন্তু গরম করে নেওয়ার পর তুমি যদি ওকে না বেঁকিয়ে দাও সাথে সাথে, তাহলে ওটা আবার একই হয়ে যাবে। So botulinum toxin is something like that. আমরা মাসেল গুলোকে হট করে দিচ্ছি, and during that period of hotness তোমার যা যা করার তোমাকে করতে হবে। So especially the first 6 months after the botulinum toxin, the physiotherapy is very, very important.
Definitely.
First 6 months is very important.
Sir, I wanted to ask, a lot of patients have sialorrhea, excessive drooling. They can't swallow their secretions. Hyoscine patch is not available in India. I tried using hyoscine tablets, diluting, using a small volume diluting, and they worked. Is it practical and feasible to use hyoscine tablets? I use Buscopan and it some hyoscine.
খুব dry হয়ে যায়।
No experience. That's a very important, I don't have any experience with that.
That's a very important problem you have raised, Preeti. That's a real nuisance for the parents.
Hyoscine patch থাকে না, আর hyoscine tablet যা হয় না, hyoscine butyl একটা পাওয়া যায়, আমি ইউজ করেছিলাম, খুব মুশকিল পাওয়া গেল।
Hyoscine patch is the actually nowadays being tried, but I have seen one patient not here abroad that the parotid duct টাকে ওরা posteriorly implant করে দিয়েছে।
বাইরে তো salivary duct ligation করে, সেটা কি হয়?
লাইগেশন তো কমপ্লিট করা যায় না, কারণ তাহলে তো সিক্রেশন হয়ে যাবে, ওটাকে posteriorly নিয়ে যেতে হয়।
ওকে, না স্যার এই
আর গ্লাইকোপাইরোলেট কেমন কাজ করে রে অরিজিৎ?
Glycopyrrolate is again as you use it, it will serve you. The moment you stop it, it will stop action.
So কি নামে পাওয়া যায়
glycolate tablet? Glycolate. It's available as a 2 milligram tablet. Glycopyrrolate হচ্ছে।
Some of our babies need it who have excessive drooling and can't swallow their secretion, নালে aspirate করবে ওরা। আর একটা প্রবলেম না, এখান থেকে এনআইসিইউ থেকে বেবি যারা ফিডিং সেরেব্রাল মানে
নিউবর্ন বেবিকে দিবি না। নিউবর্ন বেবির বেস্ট হচ্ছে যে প্রোন পজিশনিং।
আরেকটা জিনিস আমরা করি যে এনআইসিইউ থেকে ওরোগ্যাস্ট্রিক ফিডে সবসময় একটা বেবি যাচ্ছে যার ফিডিং নিচ্ছে না, তাকে সবসময় নেসোগ্যাস্ট্রিক টিউব করে দেওয়াটা ইজ বেটার দ্যান an orogastric. Orogastric always gets displaced, so long term feeding baby should always be on a nasogastric tube.
Arijita, whatever we do, there is no good center to monitor these babies in Calcutta.
Agreed. Maybe 1 or 2 places. I think that the SSKM Child Development Unit is
ও
doing a
সুচন্দ্রা
reasonable job.
সুচন্দ্রা
You
ভালো
cannot,
কাজ করে সেটা তো
হ্যাঁ,
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
ওটা বলতে হবে, মানে
হ্যাঁ
people who are doing good work in their limited ability, definitely I whatever feedback I have got, and there is huge amount of burden of patients, even ওই যেটা আছে সিটির কাছে, সেটাও NIOH, they also do a reasonably good
NIOH
amount
এ
of
কিচ্ছু হয় না,
work.
জাস্ট দ্য সার্জিক্যাল ম্যানেজমেন্ট অফ দি
কিচ্ছু হয়
সেরেব্রাল
না বলা
পলসি
মুশকিল,
পেশেন্টস।
বলা উচিত নয় কবিতা, that's too
মানে
strong.
সার্জিক্যাল ম্যানেজমেন্ট ভালো করে ওরা, বাট আদার অ্যাসপেক্টস
মানে
খুব একটা
nowhere is ideal, but I guess
হ্যাঁ
this is how it is going to be because of resource constraints.
যেটা
But
আগে করতো ডক্টর ওই অ্যাডাক্টার টেনোটমিটা ডক্টর অশোক সেনগুপ্ত আর নিলয় খুব ভালো করতো, আর ওই টেন্ডোঅ্যাকালিস ইলংগেশনটা which is again very important, টেন্ডোঅ্যাকালিস ইলংগেশন সেটাও নিলয় ভালো করে। এই দুটো অপারেশন বাচ্চাদের খুব দরকার, একটা অ্যাডাক্টার টেনোটমি আর একটা and the orthosis. The students must know about ankle orthosis, ankle knee orthosis, ankle hip orthosis, ankle knee spine orthosis. They should know about all this orthosis, especially
একদম।
those who want to give the MRCP examination.
জন্য পেগ লাগে, হাসুদি ম্যাডাম করেন কি না নাকি করে পেগ?
হ্যাঁ, PEGO use হয়. PEG is relating to feeding difficulties. There are so many aspects that you can talk about.
Another problem is that the acceptance of PEG in our society is very poor. They are putting the patient on oral feeding, giving the risk of repeated aspirations, PICU admissions. They are put the patient on NG2 feeding, but they are not very ready to put PEG. I am able to make 4 of my kids to get PEG, and all of them are very much satisfied after getting the PEG. And we have put the Mickey button laparoscopic, and all of 4 of them are very much satisfied. The PGs knows that they are coming to the hospitals. The incidence of Dr. Subhashis Saha করেন আমরা মুকুন্দপুরে।
কস্ট কত?
হ্যাঁ
কস্ট খরচা কত?
Around 60,000. Around 60,000. And it made the life so much simple to them. Previously, they used to admit each and every month once or twice. After that, the admission rate decreased to once in a year.
আর একটা জিনিস বলবো, সবসময় এনজি টিউব দিলে না, you need some sort of enteral nutrition like ensure এইসব। পেগ দিলে না, you can even use blended diet.
Yeah, kitchen diet, you can use the kitchen diet, না?
না, blended diet বলছি কি মিক্সিতে মিক্স করে।
আমেরিকাতে তো রাইট এন্ড লেফট ইউজ করে। আমেরিকাতে ইভেন একটা বাচ্চার গ্রোথ হচ্ছে না, শুধু গ্রোথ হচ্ছে না, তাতে ওকে একটা পেগ করে দিচ্ছে।
ক্রনিক ডিজিজে পেগ করছে, চালিয়ে জিনিসগুলো দেয়া যাবে।
And putting a Mickey button very much easy. It's not a big deal. It's just a 20 minutes procedure.
Just for 20 minutes. That's easy.
Okay, coming back to the drooling of saliva bit that Preeti came up with. আমি কয়েকটা স্লাইড দেখতে পাচ্ছি এখন আমার। So you have constant soiled clothing because of your drooling. You have an unpleasant odor. You can have sore skin around mouth and chin that gives rise to infections because of this. You can become dehydrated. Of course, there is difficulties in chewing and speech, and the social rejection if you have this. And the only pharmacological interventions, medical, that are appropriate are oral glycopyrrolate, যেটা আমরা কথা বললাম এই glycolate tablet, syrup কিছু পাওয়া যায় না আমার জানা নেই, and the hyoscine patch. So these are the 2 things that have been mentioned that can be used. Oral hyoscine, other medicines haven't been mentioned here in the treatment.
একটা বাচ্চা কোশ্চেন হচ্ছে যে একটা সেরেব্রাল পলসি বাচ্চা কাঁদছে, so you start from the ear to the tooth. Tooth is a very important cause of crying. Then the next is the reflux. GERD is very common, and then the severe constipation is also very, very common, and subluxation of the hip joint. When the hip joint is subluxating, they cry like anything, but the moment it is dislocated, then they stop their cry. So during that dislocating phase, they go on crying. So that these 3-4 points you should always consider when a child of cerebral palsy goes on crying. Tooth, ear, reflux, constipation, and dislocation, subluxating or dislocating hip joint.
স্যার একটা খুব প্র্যাকটিক্যাল প্রবলেম যেটা আমরা পিআইসিউ তে ফেস করি, আমার পিজিসরাও সেটা বলতে পারে, যখন পিআইসিউ তে উই গেট আ সিক চাইল্ড, সিপি, সিভিয়ার নিউমোনিয়া, এআরডিএস, সেপটিক শক, আমরা যখন তাকে প্রগনোসিস এক্সপ্লেন করি, তো উই ফেস দ্যাট অলমোস্ট 70 to 80% কিড প্যারেন্টস, ইভেন অফ আ কিড অফ আ কোয়াড্রিপ্যাটিক সেরিব্রাল পালসি, ওরা এটাই বলে তো বাচ্চা তো নরমাল, জাস্ট একটু কথা বলতে পারে না, একটু চলতে পারে না। এটা কি ওদের মানে ডিনায়াল নাকি ইগনোরেন্স নাকি সত্যি সত্যি আগে থেকে কাউন্সেলিং করা হয় না? এবং 70 to 80% টাইম লেগেই যায় কাউন্সেলিং করতে।
I think it's a combination of all the things you said. Denial, lack of information, lack of education, অনেক কিছুর সঙ্গে রিলেটেড।
না অরিজিৎ, মোস্ট ইম্পর্টেন্ট যেটা আমি দেখেছি যে ওদের না থাকতে 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 ওদের ইনিশিয়াল পার্টে একটা ডিনায়াল থাকে, তারপরে ওদের অ্যাকসেপ্টেন্স হয়ে যায়, এন্ড অ্যাকসেপ্টেন্সটা এতটাই হয় দে ডোন্ট ইভেন ওয়ান্ট এ নরমাল বেবি, বলে না আমরা একে নিয়েই থাকবো। দে ক্যানট এফোর্ড টু, আমরা হয়তো ভাবি, আমাদের কাছে মনে হয় যে ঠিক আছে গেলে বোধহয় ভালো, নো, মানে নেভার এভার ওরকম কোনো কথা, নেগেটিভ কথা ওদেরকে বলতে পারবে না, বেঁচে লাভ কি, কিংবা কি হবে, বাঁচবে না, এইসব কথা। ইট ইজ অলমোস্ট, মানে ইনফ্যাক্ট অ্যাটাচমেন্ট ইজ মোর দেন দ্য নর্মাল।
না বলা তো উচিত নয়। We should always be positive as physicians, as pediatricians, giving them a little hope whatever we can, without giving any false hopes. আমার কাছে একটা পেশেন্ট এসেছিল, সেরিব্রাল পলসি, 12 বছর বয়স, তাকে লোকাল ডাক্তার, এটা বিহারের কথা হচ্ছে, উইদাউট নিশ্চয়ই কোনো কোয়াক কিংবা ভেরি বেসিক প্র্যাকটিশনার দেখছিল, সে বাচ্চার বাবাকে বলেছে ইয়ে জব 12 সাল হোগা তব ইয়ে চলেগা। তখন থেকে পুয়ার মানে ফাদার হ্যাজ স্পেন্ট 12 years doing nothing, continuing with this particular doctor, and when he reached his 12th birthday, তখন কিছু দেখছে যে হাঁটতে চলতে পারছে না, তখন সে কলকাতায় এসে দেখেছে যে এবার কিছু করা যায় কিনা। So that defeats the whole purpose.
There was also a paper on the perceived quality of life of these children. Their perceived quality of life is much better than what we perceive them as.
Yes,
right.
So I've got it. I want to talk to Deepa. Deepa, are you there? Deepa Barul?
I'm here. Sir, hello.
Have you gone back to your place?
Yes, sir. But now I am in my own parents' home. Actually, I came from the Kolkata. That's why they extended my quarantine period to 28 days. That's why I can reach.
Okay.
By 24th only. I cannot even move out of the room.
Virus can be strong up to 28 days.
Anyway, Deepa, I want to.
Actually, I told. I
Deepa,
told
I want to
after 14 days.
You tell them that you are also taking the Acidobacter and Klebsiella from ICHPICU. Tell them.
Sir,
No, Deepa, you work very well. You work very well, and we will miss you. We'll miss you. But that is the reason we have formed another group today. Is that the boys? But please keep this picture of yours in your display DP.
Yeah.
Because I want to remember all the ex-ICH people.
Yes, sir.
Vijay,
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, I can, and we will continue our academic activities. I
Thank
can see Vijit Mondol also.
Thanks.
Tanmoy Khan.
Yes, sir.
আর কে আছে রে?
শোনা যাচ্ছে না প্রভাস, শোনা যাচ্ছে না
স্যার। বিসিআইতে আমি পোস্ট ডিপ্লোমা ডিএনবি জয়েন করেছি জাস্ট 24th স্যার।
না সেটা আমরা জানি,
হ্যাঁ
সেটা জানি। আর তোর বিয়ের ছবিটাও খুব ভালো দেখলাম আমি।
স্যার চেঞ্জ করে
খুব মিষ্টি সুন্দর বউ হয়েছে, খুব ভালো।
Okay.
Deepa, once you see your child, send us a picture of your child.
Yes, sir, definitely.
Because I know that you have done a great sacrifice.
Thank you, sir.
Right. So
Anyway,
thank you, everyone.
thank
I
you.
think
Bye.
we've finished the questions, so we can call